Welcome to Meera. Pathak, Head of Product Development at Canvas 8. Welcome, Meera, to our product leadership series on everything customer insight.
Hello, thanks for having me. Really excited.
Also one of our former alumni, for anyone that doesn't know, so we know each other relatively well now. So you obviously, you know, product development at Canvas 8 is sort of consultancy and does research as well, insight work. So not a sort of traditional digital product background. So what, maybe first question is like, what does your role consist of? Or how would you describe it to people?
Yeah, what we do is strategic insight and helping businesses sort of understand and react to changes in consumer culture and behavior. So my role within that is leading the development, design and marketing teams as a unit to deliver on a quality product platform and experience, and then also the communication of our brand offer and communicating it effectively. And we deliver our services through bespoke consultancy, but also through a membership offer, which includes access to an insights platform that help product strategy marketing professionals to sort of track changes in consumer behavior. So that platform is what I'm primarily focused on in a product perspective.
Got it. Understood.
Yeah.
Let's talk, you mentioned an interesting phrase there, right? Customer insight as opposed to customer research, which is sort of how, you know, in the digital product world, everyone talks like, yeah, let's speak to customers, let's use customer research. What is the difference? What does customer insight really mean?
Well, I think what comes to mind actually specifically, just taking it back slightly, is that our strategy director was speaking recently, so that's quite front of mind. And he was talking about how the things we buy and consume and use, they're really central to our sense of progress as an individual, but also as a society. And so all these sort of seemingly insignificant things that we're buying or using or choosing to use every day, that they are choices that we make. We choose these products to make our lives easier, more comfortable, more interesting, but ultimately it is a choice, right? So with customers choosing every day, it's because of that choice that we all have, that businesses and products need to continually evolve to the right, and the world cease to grow if people stop making that choice. So what we really care about is the value in human understanding, to understand why those choices are being made. And that's not trends and research, but behavioral insights into why people do what they do and why they want what they want. And that clarity is what we look to deliver to our clients. So when you're starting from those foundations of curiosity, you're always naturally going to be asking why and digging deeper into why people behave how they behave.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. It's really such a good point to make, because it's, I think, such a common mistake, because it's difficult, is we talk in product about customer research, right? So it's like speak to the customers, but I think takes practice. I mean, it's one core topic we covered in the Product MBA, right? Of how do you actually dig in and get under the surface there, and how can you understand that like every product is ultimately a vehicle for taking someone from this sort of current state, helping them progress towards some sort of ideal transformation. And I think
actually that was a really important learning from the Product MBA as well, remembering that you want to go from a current state to a desired state. It really helps you to kind of remain strategic, which I thought was great. And I guess if we were to kind of dig into what we mean by an insight as opposed to difference from a research or a trend, a customer insight really is, or how we would describe it, is a new and useful truth about your customer. So it's new because it has to be something that you or your competitors haven't really heard before, so that it's a new problem that no one else is solving for it to be kind of really on the money. And that doesn't mean the behavior has to be new. You know, people's behaviors are quite rigid and fixed, but we need to have a new take on it and kind of look for the different tensions or overlapping in the behaviors to find the new problems. And then that is actually what makes it useful. So what makes it useful is that it should reveal an opportunity, not just be something interesting, I suppose. And that's where kind of research stops. It can be really interesting ideas, but doesn't necessarily reveal the opportunity. So I can give an example. For instance, we might do a lot of research and kind of understand that people compare or tend to compare their efforts in sustainability with their friends, which is really interesting. But if you kind of dig into the tensions of why do people do that, what's that comparing sort of suggests this idea of competitiveness, and you start to think about something a little bit more transformative. So with people comparing their sustainable efforts with their friends, you could probably drive initiatives for climate change or boost those initiatives with a bit of healthy competition. And suddenly you're into a really interesting space there for a solution. And that's all because, I mean, that's a hypothesis, but that's all because we've dug into a little bit more about, well, why are they comparing these things with their friends? And not just stopping at that. So it's essentially to aid and find a human problem that no one else is solving, which is why you need to kind of dig deeper.
Yeah, I think it's such a nice framework as well, because I personally I find it difficult to explain it's hard to realize the importance of this until you see the results of it, where it's either you've built something that's technically nice product and you've spoken to lots of customers, so you build the thing that they may have asked for, you think makes sense, but you've missed like that key insight. So you generally either build something they don't want, or something that's just like a bit too generic, and therefore they're not bothered about trying it. And I think every great product is driven by one unique insight, and just really focusing on whatever that insight is in most cases.
And it is interesting you touch on like kind of the dangers or the risks of that, because there are risks of focusing too much on market research. So I think generally businesses focus on market research, user analytics, and market trends. But I think there's three main risks with that. So one, in terms of market research or asking a customer what they want, they don't always know what they want. There's the famous phrase, right, from Henry Ford, if you asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Or actually, I think there's a more recent quote I read from Steve Jobs, which is, even if you ask customers what they want, by the time you've built it, they want something else. So because their needs are evolving, which is incredibly relevant now more than ever with everything that's going on. People's kind of perceptions and mindsets are shifting, so you have to keep tracking. So that's kind of a challenge with just market research. And then with market trends, you don't know what's influencing these trends that you're seeing in a market. People are buying, and why are things buying and selling? You're making assumptions on that based on what consumers have said they wanted, so not really about what is happening around them culturally or with user data, as we know that you don't necessarily have context. So they clicked on this thing 100 times, or they didn't click on there. You have a good idea of why they did that, but you don't really have context. And while all this research and information is really, really important, of course, and it's more helpful than not getting it, unless you dig into the human drivers, you're potentially in a more dangerous space, as you said, to get quite confident in an idea that actually you hadn't really qualified.
I mean,
and actually, do you know what I think? Sorry, no, I was just going to say, it's actually really interesting with product, because we're in the business of making hypotheses and testing them and making informed decisions. But I think it's important to remember that our role is to not make assumptions on what we believe the consumer feels, but what we believe will solve the challenges. So we can get more information, and we can reduce the uncertainty on what they feel or what they need or what their beliefs are, what their behaviors are. That's information we can get. So the hypotheses we should be making are what will be the solutions, really.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic, because I don't know, I've been thinking about a lot the last few years, but this quantification of everything. And it's particularly in product, there's a trend around, particularly driven by lean startup, as the sense for people that read the books and talk about these things but don't practice them. There is a sense that you can basically, if you look at data, you're going to build a great product. And that is not true. I think as you said, it's you need to come up with an insight, and there's no formula for doing that, right? It's a bit of trend, it's a bit of like your own intelligence, creativity, speaking to customers, yes, very important, but you can't, I don't believe that there's a clear playbook for going like this, this is an insight. So there is a place to come in with having a very specific hypothesis and validating that. So, we do that with putting your minimal viable offer, right? So a representation, like, this is our key insight. Is it actually valuable? Put it on a landing page, get people to sign up. If they sign up, getting some sort of indication. Equally, when you build the product, you can look at analytics to see, like, are people using it? But there's a danger that you miss the thing that really matters, which is the unique insight or unique value that your customer is really interested in.
Yeah, and you know what? It's all about trying to give people, businesses, more confidence in decision making, and reducing the number of unknowns. There's always going to be unknowns, product and innovation is kind of riddled with uncertainty, and we talk so much about how you need to get comfortable with those unknowns, and that's where we have testing and iteration so that you can get more confidence with your decisions. But there are ways to reduce those number of unknowns, and it is through this sort of holistic view of the consumer, of the person really, and their behaviors and why they behave the way they do, and kind of getting that clarity of purpose. And actually, I think, as I was saying, why it's important now more than ever, there's going to be a lot of businesses, and I'm sure everyone kind of listening, their business is probably being quite conservative right now in the current economy with spending and costs. But I think one place you really can't cut corners is consumer insight, because you kind of need to double down there so that you've got enough clarity to have the confidence in where you invest in the future.
Yeah, particularly as a lot of those core assumptions are changing, right? As people change,
yes,
as they evolve this year. I think that's something.
Yeah, exactly.
More people joining Prod MBA because they're suddenly having a lot of space to say, like, what do I actually want to do with my life? And that career change they sort of vaguely thought about, they're now saying, I'm going to go and do that now. So it completely changes the business model.
That's a really good point. What's happened in the world right now, people's, what they're doing at work, or what they're consuming. So if we talk about B2B customers, their day-to-day life is changing so much, that's influencing who they want to be professionally as well. So everything is very blended, that you have to have a really holistic view and think about it from an insight
constantly
perspective.
Be like revisiting what are those insights. Let's maybe make this a bit more sort of tactical, so people can take these ideas, put them into practice. On that topic, I think really very common argument I hear is that, say, ultimately, to build a good product, you need to have a unique insight. You need to go after, in almost all cases, you go after a specific niche and a specific position in the market, right? Unless you're the biggest player in the market and you're trying to go for just dominance. Founders particularly, or product leaders, would say, well, it seems like a bigger risk to go after one thing rather than spread our bets a bit more. How do you make people, like, what's the process for making somebody more confident in saying, right, we're going to go after this unique insight, this unique position?
Sorry, I think that just cut out there a little bit. Go after this unique insight.
Yeah. So how do you, to say, right, you're going to go after this one thing rather than spreading your bets?
Well, I think thinking about being comfortable with that, and actually this kind of ties back to your role as a product leader. You really want to give your team and people autonomy in being able to go out and kind of find these hypotheses and test them. And the challenge is in a lot of businesses right now, you're relying either on the intuition of the people that have been there for a very long time, or kind of outdated knowledge. And so you're either bottlenecking the kind of the responses to this with just a few people, and like I said, you're kind of getting a bit sort of outdated in terms of the knowledge. So I think by applying the infrastructure in having that data and kind of defining the user personas, and really kind of getting into a clear specific niche, you're giving everybody the autonomy to continually test and trial, and ultimately come up with answers. And what you're really doing is creating that culture of curiosity, which you need to dig into that space as a product leader. And as the individual sort of product manager, that goes back to the lean and agile way of working, and what we were saying at the top of this conversation of not thinking about, okay, what's the feature I need to create, or what's the next release to respond to the pressures for the business, but what's the desired state we want to get to. So let's focus on loads of mini kind of tests and trials and experiments that edge us closer to that desired state. So you can really, you're not going to solve that one problem through one solution. So you can have a real focus on it by breaking it down into loads of little mini experiments. And as each of those experiments gets you closer to it, you're kind of empowered to keep going, and you feel supercharged, rather than it being this unknowable result that is 6 months away.
Got it. So you mentioned that sort of autonomy and frameworks. Do you think like in your case, you start with the persona, and then it's like, okay, well, let's explore this and see this person, right, and see what is there. Do you think there's always, if you're looking at, say, is there always a unique insight? I don't know. I've never really thought about it.
Well, I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying before, that the behaviors might always be the same. We don't have to kind of look into it and go, oh, they're behaving differently every day, or they must be behaving differently every day, otherwise we've not got a great idea. Excuse me. It's more about how can you kind of continually test these behaviors in different ways, think laterally about what else is influencing these behaviors, so that you can try to come to something new and different, and try and find a new useful truth. But you know, it's not you kind of want to take one and test it first before you kind of continue. You're not trying to continually come up with ideas, because you do need to test them. So and also equally, I think it's important to remember that some of the most, they don't always have to be super exciting. They might be really boring ideas and really boring insights. That's okay. I'm not talking about come up with something really exciting. It's just try and look at it in a different way, so that you are essentially trying to, you know, outdo your competitor. And I really think the way to have that edge is to think deeper, and it's really about relying on behavioral science, cultural drivers, societal drivers, and like I say, thinking laterally across who is that human that is using this. They're probably also doing other things, and what's their behaviors in that space, to understand what their driving forces in this space. So yeah, there's not always something new, but you can look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really good advice. It's like different perspective. It's things like, you know, we talk a lot about the beliefs that you can either, that are causing friction or that you can leverage. So, you know, for example, something that causes friction for us would be, well, like, I'm not going to do if I'm going to do an MBA, I'm going to do it from an accredited university, because there's a cultural belief that that's valuable. So that, you know, pushes people against the offer. But equally, we can leverage things like, you know, lack of belief in courses being effective. And like we address that on the homepage by saying, like, this is not a course. And obviously we deliver on, the core product is based around that as well. But so I think it's so key to understand, like, what are the forces of action and how can you leverage those, or at least just recognize them and address them.
Totally. And it also leads to innovation. Like, this is something when I was working through the Prod MBA. So to give an example, I was trying to it felt like niche that I was like a real saver that for them. So you know, how can I save them time?
Your internet froze.
When I was working on the Prod MBA, kind of my hypothesis was I needed the niche I was working with, they needed to save time in getting answers. So how can I save them time? And all these things that I could do to save them time. And it wasn't until I dug in a little bit deeper, using the sort of tools that you laid out, asking questions and asking why, pushing forward, that it was that the reason they were so time poor or pressured was because the internal relationships between two teams wasn't gelling well enough. And actually, that was such a bigger revelation. If you can help facilitate the way those teams relate better, that's way more valuable of a place to be than just trying to save them time, because the pressure in time was coming from that driving tension and that sort of relationship challenge that they weren't communicating well. So yeah, there's some really great examples of how
that's a great example in itself, actually, of how it's like getting actually, it's rarely the obvious problem that is the problem. It's some little thing that you pick up and then a flash of a conversation or a word phrasing.
And then you as a product manager are in a really exciting place, because you've delivered this sort of opportunity for innovation now, that you might pivot your business and say, actually, let's look over here. And suddenly that's not a scary thing to do, but actually really exciting, because you've got the confidence to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. I think maybe just a point to sort of leave people with, we talked a lot exclusively about customer insight, which is great. I think it's valuable. What, you know, if somebody was going to do one thing to sort of start trying to uncover this or start bringing into their team culture, like what would you suggest doing? One small thing.
Well, I think as a product manager specifically, you want to put yourself forward and be accountable for this. That's a really exciting place to be, because you want to be somebody who's delivering on both consumer and business outcomes. And actually, one thing that Product MBA helped me do is make the case for building the team that enables this. So I think you want to make the case that what sort of team you need around you to be able to do that. You need a data analysis or some sort of support so that you can understand the kind of key drivers from from the data that you're tracking. You want to set specific metrics for yourself. In fact, I think yourself, Henry, said something about have a baseline of speaking to one customer every week. Set these sort of targets for yourself so that you are creating a behavior of diving into consumer insights rather than making it kind of nebulous. But what are the sort of specific tactics or metrics you can set yourself so that everything is centered around getting that, understanding that desired state?
I mean, it's even about that, the point, I think the reason I suggested it is usually about the process, not the outcome. It's like if you speak to one customer every week, like you will, unless you're really screwing it up, like you will come up with a unique, there'll be value there. There's going to be a lot of value, so that you do it every week and it will come, I suppose.
Yeah, and that is process. And then I guess just the final thing to leave on, which is I guess quite relevant to Canvasate in our situation, is look into different ways of understanding people. Like I said, there's behavioral science. Look into the cultural and social drivers. Make the time into digging around in terms of the zeitgeist and the behavioral triggers, because it will just give you a lot more foundation as to why people do what they do.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think actually summing that up, speak to at least one customer per week and research around the area, like trends. I think that's a common theme actually that's come up by more senior product leaders, is like leverage what is out there already. Meera, it's been
laterally, maybe.
Yeah. So it's been really, really fun conversation. Super interesting. This is a topic that I think, in terms of product, I want to integrate more and more and like really dig deep into. I think it's just it is the most valuable thing you can learn, I think, in product. You can be great at delivering stuff, but coming up with the right ideas is difficult.
And it's so empowering.
Sorry. Yeah, definitely. Anywhere you want us to send people, maybe to Canvasate, to your LinkedIn? I don't know if you're writing anything.
Yeah, definitely send us to Canvasate. I can share you with a link. We've actually did a promotion last year called the Re-Up, where we were sort of offering all professionals access to the library for 30 days. So we can definitely kind of set something like that up, for the audience.
I'll link through to the website then. Awesome. Thanks so much, Meera, for joining the series as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.